What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham Jesus and Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network and on Peacock. And today we're talking the October 2nd, 2021 edition of Talking Smack. Probably one of the most eventful episodes to date, as it featured more supplemental picks made in the WWE draft for 2021, in addition to everything we saw on Friday night on SmackDown. So, like I said in my SmackDown audio review yesterday, if you haven't already checked that out, please do so. I broke down all the Night 1 main picks that were televised in that review. Today we're talking the supplemental picks that were made here on Talking Smack. I'm going to have an entire post up at some point, probably tomorrow. Just this weekend has been hectic, but breaking down every Night 1 and every first half of the 2021 WWE draft selection, my analysis and my thoughts on each and every one of them, who went to Raw, who went to SmackDown, and stuff like that. So keep an eye out for that. As far as Talking Smack is concerned, we finally have a new host for the show. Now, I've said here on my Talking Smack reviews and my Raw Talk reviews for weeks now, probably even months, dating back to when they started the new format, they weren't consistent with who they had hosting the show. Both shows, not even just Talking Smack, but Raw Talk as well. Matt Camp was a constant. I think he was always part of the show as far as I can remember. Matt Camp was either always hosting or he was an analyst. Just two people, but on Talking Smack and Raw Talk respectively, they've had him and Kevin Patrick for Talking Smack. For Raw Talk, they've had him and Caleb Braxton. Also on Raw Talk, him and Scott Stanford as recently as this week. On Talking Smack, they've had him and Peter Rosenberg, him and Sam Roberts. And now we finally have a regular duo, as far as I understand, for the show here on out. Now, things in WWE can change on a dime, at the drop of a dime. Can really just change on a whim as far as what WWE is feeling, who they're liking in the role. So, not to say this is permanent. The press release WWE put out the other day indicated it would be a permanent change, which I'm completely fine with. I will miss Caleb Braxton and Paul Heyman hosting this show. In the old format, which I, strive for, what I long for is that old format of Talking Smack and Raw Talk. It was just far better than this. If they are going to be doing the studio format from here on out, and it looks like they will be because it's been 3 months and we've had the studio format ever since they returned to the road, the people they have doing the show work. Matt Camp isn't the most exciting guy on screen, but he knows what he's talking about. He has a great knowledge of WWE. He's been there for a few years now. And as a, NFL type of guy, also coming from Bleacher Report represent, he's got that experience in this host type of a role for a show like this. So I think he does well. And then actually hosting the show now will be former, or maybe current, I'm not sure, MLB Network, NHL Network host Jackie Redmond. Never heard of her, never seen her before, know nothing about her aside from the fact that, again, she comes from the NHL Network, MLB Network. First day impressions here, I thought she did a really good job. I don't know how much of a fan she really is, but she didn't make any mistakes here on day one. It sounded like if she doesn't really follow the product too closely up until recently, then she's been doing her homework. And as a host, she's charismatic, she's likable. I don't know, I just thought she did really well in the role. Maybe that will change. Maybe I'll come back and say in a month or two, hey, she's not that good. Either she doesn't know what she's talking about, or she gets off track too often, or like Charlie Caruso was very good as a host. I don't know if she's this way on ESPN, but like she would get off track all the time, constantly. And it was just so annoying. And some people really like that shit. I just found it completely distracting. If she could stay on track and continue to be knowledgeable about the product, I can't see why she won't, do well at this. So I think she will, continue to do well and hopefully thrive in this role. But yeah, she joined Matt Camp to host this show. They run down the WWE Draft for 2021 Round 1 results, including Big E and Roman Reigns going to Raw and SmackDown, respectively. They did remind us that the moves do not go into effect until the day after Crown Jewel, which is going to be October 22nd, so in 3 weeks. They recap the Round 2 results, and they kind of talk about how the New Day has been still split up, despite being on Raw on the same show for seemingly a week or two. They're back to being on their separate brands. Matt Camp said that he was happy to see Drew McIntyre on SmackDown, a show that he started on, and we'll hear from Drew a little bit later on in the show. They recap Round 3, including Hit Row going to SmackDown. Matt Camp loves that, and Keith Lee going to Raw, or rather, Keith Bearcat Lee going to Raw, more specifically, I guess. Got to get it right. You got to include the nickname in there. They run down the round 4 draft picks, and Matt Camp calls Austin Theory a very special superstar and a massive pick. He could be a guy that could be a first-round pick in a year or two, which I find hard to believe, and I'm a big Austin Theory fan, but time will tell. But no, I thought he was a good pick, though. And he was a comedy guy down in NXT, but I think he could do well on the main roster. The last run that he had wasn't exactly the greatest. He was involved in like 5 different factions. He was only in the main roster for like 3 or 4 months. Hopefully he has a bit more success this time and longevity. They also recap the 8-man tag team match that saw the New Day and the Street Profits knock off Robert Roode, Dolph Ziggler, Otis, and Chad Gable in 8-man tag team action on SmackDown this week. Matt Camp calls the New Day the best team ever, as voted on by WWE in their fucking talk show or whatever it was a couple of months ago. And how we might be seeing a rekindling of the New Day versus Uso feud, assuming the Usos wind up on SmackDown as they should be as the SmackDown Tag Team Champions. It'd be fucking dumb for them to go to Raw at this point and break up the bloodline. But we might see a rekindling of that rivalry between the New Day and the Usos, which it's been a couple of years since we've seen it, so I'm all for that personally. Xavier Woods, after they interview Kofi Kingston and New Day, or Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods about being back on SmackDown, he jokes that he's back to hosting Talking Smack because once upon a time when they first brought back Talking Smack, right before SummerSlam 2020, he was actually slotted as the initial host. The Miz did the hosting for a few weeks. I guess they didn't even tell Xavier Woods that he'd be doing the gig until they announced it online. Typical WWE. But yeah, he did do the hosting for a while until he got drafted to Raw, so it was very short-lived, but I thought he did a great job, though. And while they're talking to New Day, while Sarah Schreiber is interviewing them, or maybe it was Kayla Braxton. It was Kayla Braxton backstage at SmackDown. Kofi Kingston was eating a vegan burger, vegan food or vegan burger or whatever, so that was funny. Woods says as far as the Usos go, they will run that back at some point. And they've done everything with the Usos. They've beaten them so many times. He actually wants to face other teams before they get back to the SmackDown Tag Team titles. And that was about it. So, short, sweet, and fun interview from the New Day. Back to the studio, Matt Camp and Jackie Redmond recap the Rollins home invasion. And Camp says that he's gone too far. Rollins, that is. And that he's currently winning the mind games with Edge. And it's probably going to lead to one more match. Very likely Crown Jewel, if I had to take a guess. They also say the issue currently between Carmella and Liv Morgan is personal at this point, and it's not over between them. Oh, fucking yay. I really hope Carmella goes to Raw. Keep Liv Morgan on SmackDown. Even if Liv Morgan goes to Raw and Carmella stays put on SmackDown, which I doubt she will because Corey Graves is on Raw, and that's her real-life boyfriend, they gotta break these two up. I mean, honestly. This feud's been going on for months now. It really isn't exactly leading anywhere. Liv Morgan has won a majority of the matches. Why are we still doing this fucking feud? It's time to move on. So the first person we find out that is drafted in the 2021 supplemental draft, you want to call it that, is none other than Aaliyah. Yes, we don't hear from anyone else that was drafted in the supplemental draft but Aaliyah. I mean, to be fair, I don't give a fuck about Aaliyah, but her finding out that she's going to SmackDown is a cool moment. She was wearing a red dress or a jumpsuit or whatever you want to call it. I honestly have no idea. She seemed genuinely surprised that she was going to SmackDown. She was like, oh, shut the hell up. I should have worn blue. I would have worn blue had you told me sooner, blah, blah, blah. Had I known earlier than this. She was really SmackDown, and she says, listen, if anyone says that you can't have a dream, keep going, blah, blah, blah. Aaliyah was down in developmental for literally 5 or 6 years. I remember seeing her on NXT as early as 2015 on that Breaking Ground show. She had been a regular on NXT TV on and off as like an enhancement talent for a very long time. I'm sorry, I've just never really seen her improve. She seems like a perfectly nice person. I really don't give a fuck about Aaliyah. I don't really find this to be a great pick at all for SmackDown. They were clearly waiting for the draft to happen for her to be assigned to one show or the other. She had made an appearance or two on Main Event, but that was about it. We haven't really seen her other than that. So, she's on SmackDown now for whatever the fuck that's worth. Matt Cam says to keep an eye on her because she's a different type of draft pick. She's not moving from Raw to SmackDown or SmackDown to Raw. She's moving up from NXT. And that's an all-new motivator, he says. Whatever. He also calls Brock Lesnar calm and a different side of Brock than we've seen. And Roman Reigns is squirming right now, he says. This is a different type of threat than he has faced up to this point in his run as Universal Champion. We hear from Drew McIntyre backstage at SmackDown with Caleb Braxton. He says that he and Roman Reigns have a history. since he came back to WWE 3 years ago. Most notably in 2019 when they feuded going into WrestleMania. Roman Reigns, I think, beat him every time from that point afterward. But they also had a great match at Survivor Series last year that was also won by Roman Reigns. So clearly they're going to run it back at some point, whether it be at WrestleMania, could it be a Rumble match, who knows. But he knows that he can take him down, and if and when he does, that'll be the biggest moment of his career, which is saying a lot because he's accomplished a lot, especially as a two-time WWE champion. But to beat Roman on the role that he's on right now would be a massive moment for him, he says. And it would be a great match. I don't know exactly if I want to see Drew be the one to beat Roman, but that's just me. He also mentions how he hasn't been on SmackDown since 2011. Now, obviously, he's had matches on SmackDown in that time, but he hasn't actually had a full run on SmackDown since 2011. Because when he first debuted in WWE, I mean, for a cup of coffee, it was in 2007, but as a full-time member of the main roster, it was in 2009 on SmackDown. Got moved to Raw in 2011. Did absolutely nothing on Raw. I honestly don't even really remember the run that he had on Raw in 2011. Was he even there? I honestly don't even fucking remember. I think he was mainly on Superstars. Holy shit, I don't even really remember the run that he had on Raw. I don't think he did anything. I remember one Raw match that he had with Evan Bourne, maybe? Or was it Randy Orton? Ironically enough. Honestly, I don't remember. He did absolutely nothing on Raw. Not that he was doing a hell of a whole lot on SmackDown before he got drafted, but, you know, the brand split was thrown out the window in August of 2011. Never came back until 2016, that is. They had the Super Show, the Raw SmackDown Super Show, which was fucking dumb. And, he appeared on SmackDown after that, but he was mainly a Raw guy with 3MB until he got released in 2014, and he's been on Raw ever since returning to the main roster in 2018. So he's got unfinished business, he says, on the blue brand, and he's looking forward to achieving what he could not the first time over on Friday nights. Matt Camp and Jackie Redmond hype up the return of the King of the Ring tournament at Crown Jewel later this month, in addition to the debut of Queen's Crown. Now, I'm looking forward to both tournaments. They start next week on SmackDown. The finals will be held at the Crown Jewel pay-per-view in a few weeks. They also recap Sasha Banks versus Bianca Belair, the main event from this week's SmackDown. Good match, not as good as the WrestleMania match, obviously, but it was good. And they hype up the Crown Jewel triple threat match. That'll see Sasha Banks and Bianca Belair challenge Becky Lynch for the SmackDown Women's Championship. And it's kind of unpredictable right now, depending on where Becky ends up in the draft, and Sasha, come Monday's night 2 of the WWE draft. So here's what you guys have all been waiting for, as you probably have already heard by now, but you can hear me talk about it right now. The picks made in the quote-unquote supplemental draft, as it was once called back in the day, in the 2021 WWE draft for night 1. Technically, this was on Saturday, so it was night 2, but whatever. We don't hear from any of these people. They just kind of show a graphic indicating who was drafted at Raw and who was drafted at SmackDown, and Raw got far more people, but that isn't really surprising considering Raw is a bigger show. So, drafted to Monday Night Raw, Nia Jax. I am so fucking glad they did not waste a main pick on Nia Jax. Who cares? She's out injured right now. I think with a legit injury, she's going to be gone for a while, which is why they wrote her out of storylines in the attack from Shayna Baszler. So, maybe if she was around, she would have been moved in the initial draft, but I'm so glad that she was not, as opposed to like Naomi. I'm glad Naomi got moved in the main draft. Nia Jax, who cares? So she stays put on Raw. Nia Jax, I assume Carmella is moving shows. So if Carmella switches shows, Nia is the only person, very likely, assuming that's the case, that has not been drafted away from Raw since the initial 2016 draft. Everyone else has either been released or swap shows. I mean, Nakamura's never moved and other people like that, but they weren't involved in the 2016 WWE draft 5 years ago. Nia was. She was moved up from NXT, and she's been a part of Raw every year since. So she is still not moving, which I'm glad. I don't think SmackDown needs both Nia Jax and Aaliyah. So I'm glad she's staying put for whatever that's worth. John Morrison staying on Raw. Part of me wanted to see him back on SmackDown on his own, but maybe, I mean, unless the Miz goes back to SmackDown, then what the fuck was the point of? I mean, I don't know. Maybe they just wanted to do the split, never do a match. I know Miz had to go off and do a show. Whatever. But Morrison staying put on Raw. I don't know how fortunate of a move that is, but he's still on Raw. As well as the 24/7 champion Reggie, if he wasn't already a part of the Raw roster, he is now. R-Truth staying put on Raw. He's another guy that's been on Raw for 4 or 5 years now? No, I think he got 2018? Because he was on SmackDown in 2017, I think, or early 2018. Or maybe I don't remember. I honestly don't remember. But he's been a part of SmackDown, or rather Raw, for a few years now, so staying put on Raw. Drake Maverick. Not really a notable pick, but he was on NXT up until recently. He's made a few recent appearances on Raw. So I guess he's officially part of the Raw roster again. I don't know if that's exactly great news for him, because he didn't really do a hell of a whole lot the first time. I know he was a manager, and for AOP, that ended up going nowhere. The 24/7 title stuff was entertaining, but the problem was that he's just a fucking loser on Raw. And we've already seen him in the 24/7 title picture a million times. I don't care about Drake Maverick being back in the 24/7 title picture. It's been a year or two. It still has not been long enough. I think you could do something far more entertaining with the guy. Maybe that'll be the case. I doubt it if he's on Raw. But yeah, he's on the Raw roster officially now, coming up from NXT, technically. TBar. TBar getting drafted to Raw by himself. Very interesting. Now, it's not like, they didn't pick Mace and he's on night 2. No, they picked Mace. He's on SmackDown. The remnants of Retribution are no more. Thank the fucking Lord. I think both. I love Dominik Dijakovic. Dio Madden on his own, that doesn't really do much for me. But T-Bar going to Raw, I'd rather see him on SmackDown on his own, but him on Raw is very interesting. Very interesting. He actually tweeted after this news came out that, he was like, I'm all on my own, time to feast your eyes or whatever. A lot of people got excited about that. Bring back the old entrance music. It was great. So I'm glad he's on his own again. I really didn't care about the whole Mace and T-Bar tag team. Stop calling him fucking Mace and T-Bar. If they want to keep Mace doing the whole Retribution shit, fine, I guess. T-Bar doesn't need it. It's fucking garbage. So yeah, I would have T-Bar go back to being Dominik Dijakovic, and for anyone saying, you already have a Dominik on the show, then just call him Dijakovic. Or better yet, just call him fucking Dijak. It's a far better name, and it's far easier to remember and say. Chris Dijak, Donovan Dijak, Dijak. It doesn't matter. You don't have to not split them up because Dominik Mysterio already has the same name. And he just so happens to be on the same show now. As we found out on Friday, he's going to Raw, back to Raw rather. So that was an interesting pick. But yeah, we'll see how this one shakes up. But I'm very happy he's on his own again. Also moving to Raw, Zelina Vega. Can't really bring myself to care personally. She's moved brands a few times in the last couple of years. She started off on SmackDown, got moved to Raw in 2019, back to SmackDown last year, and she was fired in that time. Didn't spend a whole lot of time on SmackDown before moving back to Raw in this year's draft. That's a non-pick. I like Zelina as a manager, but, I guess this gets away. If Carmella goes to Raw, which he probably will, does it even really matter? I don't know. Akira Tozawa staying put on Raw. He's another guy that's been a part of Raw for 5 years now. He went back to 205 Live, back to SmackDown, never back to Raw rather. Never been on SmackDown. So I guess the ninja shit stays alive on Raw, which is fucking terrible. Otis and Gable moving to Raw as a unit. They're not being split up. So Alpha Academy on Raw. They were teasing them and the Usos recently, so who are the Raw Tag Team Champions? RK Bro? And that could be entertaining. I don't know if they're exactly on RK Bro's level, but Otis and Gable on Raw is interesting. Otis has never been on Raw, I don't think. They debuted as part of the main roster in 2019 when the draft happened. Otis and Tucker both went to SmackDown. Tucker got moved away from SmackDown last year, but Otis was always a part of Raw. I'm sorry, SmackDown. So him on Raw is at least something new. Gable's moved shows at least 5 fucking times. I feel like he moves every year. He hasn't been on Raw in about 2.5 years, 3 years maybe? Maybe since early 2019, since when he was feuding or teaming with Robert Roode. He was on Raw, but that was about 2.5 years ago. So I guess that's somewhat notable, but we'll see how that shakes out. Commander Aziz and Apollo Crews back on Raw. I like Apollo Crews. I really hope they don't rekindle the rivalry between him and Big E. I'm fucking done with that shit, but I guess that was expected after he lost to Nakamura. So I don't know if you'll have any better fortunes on Raw. Unless Nakamura goes to Raw, which at this point I'm not really getting the gist that he will, and swap shows with Damian Priest. But Aziz and Crews staying put as a unit on Raw together, in addition to Doudrop. So, I guess Doudrop's away from Charlotte, losing to Charlotte in 90 seconds last week on Raw. Doudrop Becky Lynch. If Becky Lynch winds up on Raw as the champion, that could be interesting. I'm kind of here for that at some point. So we'll see how that shakes out. And her and Rhea Ripley again at some point down the road would be cool too. And then going to SmackDown, only 6 picks. The SmackDown. I think Raw got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Technically 12 if Aziz doesn't count because he's kind of with Cruz. So it's real, but in actuality, it's 13. SmackDown got 6, which again makes sense because Raw's the bigger show. They get twice as many picks. SmackDown gets 6. Aaliyah, which I already discussed. Drew Gulak back on SmackDown. Again, at this point, his career is so fucking dead in the water. I'm not even really sure how much that even matters. Moving him to Raw was one of the dumbest things I could have done last year because he was away from Daniel Bryan. And his career, he was literally on main event for his entire time that he was on Raw. So maybe moving to SmackDown will change his fortunes a little bit. I don't see it, but we'll see. Mace already talked about. He's on SmackDown. Maybe going back to Dio Madden. We'll see. Mansoor and Mustafa Ali on SmackDown. Mansoor's never been a part of SmackDown. Mustafa was on SmackDown before being drafted to Raw. I don't know. He just returned to Raw randomly in the summer of last year. Before that, he was always on SmackDown. So I thought they would move to SmackDown. That to me makes sense. They didn't really... Them and RK Bro would have been cool, but it didn't really feel like they were going anywhere on Raw, and they had their storyline on Raw, but I like them being a part of SmackDown. And Toni Storm, staying right where she is on Friday nights, I feel like as she should be. So those are your picks in the 2021 WWE Draft, Night 1, Day 2, whatever you want to call it, supplemental picks. We'll talk all about the rest of the WWE picks made on Monday during Raw. I'll have a whole review up on it. Do a whole separate post on WrestleRant, breaking each and every one of these down in written form. So stay tuned for that. Take a look at that. Keep an eye out for it in the days to come. And then I'll also, obviously, as always, be breaking down Raw Talk on Tuesday. So more picks are bound to be made then on Raw Talk, immediately following Raw, not even like the next day like Talking Smack. So those will be more immediate. I'll have my thoughts on those on Tuesday and the remainder of the picks made in the WWE Draft for 2021. Thank you guys for checking out my Talking Smack review for this week. I appreciate it. Be sure to drop a comment, like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel. All that stuff is greatly appreciated. And now stay tuned tomorrow before my Raw Talk on Tuesday, my Raw Talk review on Tuesday. We're going to have a Dark Side of the Ring review up tomorrow on Onita's FMW, the latest episode of Dark Side of the Ring, so keep an eye out for that. Have an awesome rest of your weekend, guys. I'm Graham G.S. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.